May I have your attention for a very important public service announcement? We are taking over the internet, and the United States champion of word wrestling entertainment has returned for another Friday edition of the Pocket Locker Podcast. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast. And as always, folks, I am in airplane mode. Gang, welcome back to the channel. It's so good to see you all. Ooh, that shit hit me right. That was a good hit. It's so great to see all the mode. Cheers. About to tip it on back. Crystal's lighting it up. Trees is here. Great to see y'all in the chat. Great to see y'all in the chat. So look, let's go ahead and get into it. You know, I've had a lot of things lined up to share with y'all on stream, and it's been a week where I've just been deep in my feels because there's just been so much going on. We did a stream earlier this week about supporting the students and the cause and their protest, and it's like that whole thing has just escalated and gotten even more crazy since then. And I have a bunch of stuff that I've been wanting to talk about on stream, but there was uh, a second thought video that came out today that I thought we should talk about. For those that don't know, I had a conversation with Mark Reed earlier this week. That's on the Mark Reed channel and on this channel. I had a great conversation last night with Mr. Anderson. I didn't stream that to this channel, so that's on his channel. We were talking about responding to racism and stuff, dealing with Jim Bob. And then the second thought video came out about fascism, and I was like, you know what, we kind of need to really talk about this more. So I wanted to talk about that. So that's what we're gonna do tonight. Couple things I just want to say off the top. So the first thing I want to do is define fascism, because I think it's important that we do that. I'm not going to get too complicated on everybody here. I'm just gonna show y'all what I'm working with. Hang on one sec. So I'm sharing this and gather this and restream. I want to share this instead and gather. Then I want to share this and restream. Got it. Got it. It's okay. We made it. We figured it out. So y'all see, this is nothing, right? This is a Merriam-Webster website. It's basically like going to the dictionary in your school and grabbing a dictionary off the shelf and just saying, what is fascism? All right. So here we go. Political philosophy, movement, or regime, such as that of the fascisti, that exalts nation and often race above the individual and stands for a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social regimentation, and forcible suppression of the opposition. Now there's a lot in that definition, like a lot in that definition. Um, but in particular, like an autocratic government characterized by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social regimentation, and forcible suppression of opposition. We just got to try to keep that in mind. Now I'm gonna come over here and put a little sauce on that from Wikipedia. Um, in this highlighted part here, it says fascism's extreme authoritarianism and nationalism often manifest as a belief in racial purity or a master race, usually blended with some variant of racism or discrimination against or demonized other, such as Jews, homosexuals, ethnic minorities, or immigrants. All right, so I wanted to start with that because there's a couple things I want to just get off my chest right up front because I think we have to really start talking more about fascism, way more than we have been. Um, Number one, I don't think most of us really know what fascism is or will be able to recognize it. And like I said, we're gonna get into the second thought video. I think it's incredibly well done. It's really all good. But part of what we're dealing with is a lack of basic education in terms of what a lot of people would consider like politics or social studies, but I even think of it as just civics, like the basic stuff you need to know to just be a decent participant in the kind of democratic social experiment. You know, to just graduate from the kiddie table to the big kids table to be a functioning adult in a democracy. Um, and they keep this stuff from us. So I feel like myself, I've just really begun to be able to think about fascism more directly and clearly, um, probably over the last, I guess, couple years. And for me, it's had to start with that basic of being able to define it and then really thinking through it. And so I think it's a term that's out there a lot, but even myself, I wasn't that educated on it. So now when I'm being honest, I'm like, nah, I don't think most people really know what fascism is like that, to be honest with you. They may have heard the term before, they might hear it thrown around, on in the internets and the social medias, but I don't know that people know, you know what I'm saying? Because I think even the way it's used, we treat it like an individual thing instead of we gotta recognize like, yo, like it's serious. You understand what I'm saying to you? Like it's not just a matter of being able to define it and then oh somebody says some fucked up shit and you're like, yo, you're a fascist because they said some shit like no like yo fascism is like it's really a threat to our humanity. It's really like an existential threat, right? It's really like a serious crisis we're dealing with. um and I'm not trying to sound alarmist, but I'm trying to sound the alarm. You feel me? Like it's merited. Like we need to be up in arms about this. We need to be on alert about this. We need to be I don't want to say scared, but a healthy amount of fear. Yeah, like afraid, like understanding that we can be overwhelmed by fascism and not even realize it. Um So that's one thing. And along with that, I think in all these conversations, it's emerging to me as sort of a bigger problem, like it's a meta problem, like it's an even bigger problem than the fascistic elements that we're recognizing. So we're going, holy crap, like we got to talk about this and we got to talk about that, and we're gonna, people are starting to put together this puzzle to say there's all these things that are happening that are um sending us towards fascism or something like that. Yeah, most definitely true and correct. But again, a bigger thing that's a part of that people aren't talking about is we don't even know how to recognize it, and we don't even talk about it. So how are you going to fight the enemy that you won't name? So that's a problem. Another problem is, and this is not something people might not like hearing me say this, but yo, a lot of people are fascist because of the fact that we haven't properly been educated to know what it was and how to recognize it. A lot of us have accepted fascistic ideologies and principles, and it's become baked into a lot of people's sense of just the way things are or the way things should be. And I'm not trying to dog people and throw us under the bus, but what I want to do is I want to step aside from the sort of boogeyman type of idea thinking, right? Because when you make something a boogeyman, like, oh, it's fascism and it's terrible, and again, it just becomes that thing that everybody could just point to the people over there, right? And to me, that's not as useful as a critical reflection on, like, how did we get here, and what can we do, and how do we respond. Part of it has to be an honest accounting for where do the ideas come from. What is our education, what is, how are we learning these things. um you know is have we been sprinkling a little bit too much of this stuff into the water and not thinking about it? So yeah, I just think I'm trying to just bring about, like, if anybody's listening, like, just a chance to think about it. And I think part of that is allowing us to recognize that there may be certain things that we've brought into that are very fascistic without intending to. And so recognizing that is important. And so I think we have to just be honest in many ways about, like, oh yeah, we've kind of uh taken the bait, so to speak. All right, but look, let's go ahead and jump into the tape, and we'll take it from there. Oh, y'all know what I just did. I tried to click on the YouTube tab and hit the X instead and closed it. Like, the exact, like, that's literally the worst
data breach
place
as
you
of
could click. The actual worst place you could click. All right, here we go. We got this though. We not gonna be dissuaded by technical difficulties. What the hell's going on? Oh, I messed that up so bad. All right, do this. Then do this. I think that's better. Yeah, now you're seeing gather. I don't know why the screen proportion is different than it was before.
Second Thought is a 100% viewer-funded operation. If you'd like to help support the channel and get some great perks while you're at it, consider becoming a patron
we
at
supporting the channel, bro. We letting the people know
time of writing,
we're showing mad love right now.
So it was Easter recently. At time of writing, at least. These videos take a while to make. Cut me some slack. Anyway, what do you think of when you hear the word Easter? Springtime, Easter Bunny, candy, resurrection of Jesus for our Christian comrades, and of course, these little guys. I have great memories of Easter egg hunts with my family, and now that I have a young daughter of my own, I'm excited to give her the same experience. So imagine my surprise when we go to the neighborhood playground on Easter, and there are a handful of adults trying to keep kids from picking up a bunch of eggs. Seemed a little weird. So I asked one of them what was going on, and they said, better not to look inside. So naturally, I had to look inside.
Oh, I see what's going on. Sorry, I was trying to figure out what the hell now they're doing. It's doing, for those who don't know, it has this auto idle muting. And I don't want it to do that. Okay. I'm gonna give y'all a little bit of pocket locker lore right now. When I was a little kid, when we had these events like this, they used to dress me up as the Easter Bunny. All right, go ahead. You could laugh. I know. All right. Okay. Yeah, all right. All right. Back to business.
Here's what I found. Even for someone who keeps tabs on the
y'all might not. For those that can't see, it's a little pamphlet from an organization called patriotfront.us, and it reads "One Nation Against Niggers." I'm gonna just say it because that's how it works in America. I'm black and I can say it. So that's what it says. And I was like, interesting. I've never even heard of this Patriot Front. So y'all know I had to look it up. Y'all know curiosity killed the cat. And you see this. Look at this. Look, they going paramilitary hopping out of U-Hauls. Yo, bro, they're hopping out of U-Hauls, rolling deep. Yo, they killed me with the U-Hauls. Oh my God. Please, I wish this was like a shorter loop. Oh my goodness. Why I never seen that before. That was hilarious. It looked like 45, 50 of them just just popping out the back of the U-Hauls. All right, but look, this is serious shit. Reclaim America. Okay. And then we're going to read through their principles real quick. Life. Americans will fully recognize themselves as a people, not merely citizens or residents of a country, but a people bearing a unique national interest rooted in our heritage on this continent. Our people, born to this nation of our European race, must reforge themselves as a new collective capable of asserting our right to cultural independence. The life of this nation, unique among all others, will be defended. Woo, if this ain't some KKK-ish right here. See, I love it. See how they got the white and red aesthetic of the KKK too, and they got the Ks. Y'all see they got the K. See, they made them look like arrows, but you could also kind of read the Ks as K, and then the invert is kind of got the K thing. If y'all don't see the KKK vibe, yo, they think they slick with these things, bro. They're not really that slick with these things. These things are not really that slick. I mean, it's damn near the Kmart logo. And you know, and this is how real ones roll in the hood. You know what I'm saying? They got the little, I forget what they call them, these little neck things, gaiters or something like that. Whatever you put them on your face. This is a scene. It's just a scene. But yeah, they got their costumes, their uniforms. All right, reclaim America for the white man, y'all. White man out here need to reclaim America. It's apparently tough times. Actually, I ain't even going front. That's something we're going to get into this. It really is tough times. It really is tough times, actually. It's just the interpretation of the problem and what to do about the problem are both all types of fucked up. All right. Liberty, revolution. Gotta be revolution. All right. The revival of the American revolutionary spirit will guide the people towards their inalienable right to self-determination on the course to fulfill their destiny. America will be unshackled from tyrannical rule. The corrupt and ineffective state, which subverts the national interest to favor a global plutocracy, is no longer legitimate to govern and must face alteration or abolition. An unwavering resistance will meet all enemies of the people and the nation, both foreign and domestic. The liberty of our people, paramount to our cause, will be secured. Ooh, and my man has the conquer or die on his hat. Conquer or die. Man, I don't know if that's so much of a dog whistle as it is taking a whistle and chucking it at the dog. Victory, representation. The faithful of the nation will foster a social, moral, and civilizational health, which will allow the people to prosper alongside the guidance of a representative state that ensures an existence for them and their posterity. No placement of the private interest above that of the common good will stand unopposed as the barriers impeding the nations will rise. The barriers impeding the nation's will are overcome. There we go. Sovereignty will be pursued with the securing of the American homeland against the invasion of foreign nations and interests. The victory of the American spirit, upheld by a sovereign and legitimate state, will be complete. There they go. And what's interesting too is they have these their activities down here listed, and their top 10 states, and they had, I think, some pictures. Oh yeah, so they have these pictures. And what's interesting, it says over here, from this post that's shared, is activists from Network 11 trained in Del Rapids, South Dakota. And it's so funny that literally it's just hand-to-hand combat training. Like, they say this is how they train activists. So apparently this is they don't got no writing workshops, nothing about how to contact your congressional leadership, how to do a petition, nothing about canvassing, you know, the hosting community forums to come up with public interest legislation. Nothing. Just straight. Let's just go into the parking lot and throw hands. Yo, when they be calling this shit like Patriot Fight Club or whatever the fuck, I don't know, man. It's real like that. It really is. It's just, all right. That's them, y'all. I know who these people were. This is who these people are. You know, that's who we dealing with. That's who we dealing with.
These freaks for a living, this was a little shocking. We live in a quiet suburb, there's never any trouble. And yet here we were, standing somewhere designed for children to play, picking up Easter eggs with fascist rhetoric inside. And if you think about it, this one little Easter egg is indicative of the whole fascist undercurrent in the US. Let's unpack what's going on here. I think we should start with a quick rundown of the Proud Boys and the other fascist groups in the US, because the state of official fascist organizations has changed over the last few years. The Proud Boys are an exclusively male hate group operating in the US and Canada. Besides their deeply funny no girls allowed rule, these losers are big proponents of the white genocide myth, the idea that white
Look, y'all, we gotta pay attention. We are trying to pay attention. We're trying to talk about fascism, and the first thing we roll with is these losers in their all-male group, and they actually have a no girls allowed rule. Like you can't come in my treehouse. Like they're the mean boys. The incel energy is just so. It's just so wow. That's just distracting. I couldn't even stay focused. I need to hit this weed one more time.
people, a designation that seems to fluctuate whenever convenient, are being replaced by encroaching hordes of nebulously ethnic babies. The group has been described as an alt-right fight club, conservative extremists, alt-light, overtly Islamophobic and misogynistic, and all too willing to embrace racists, anti-Semites, and bigots of all kinds. They've engaged in political violence, attended the January 6th insurrection, and have been banned from pretty much every social media platform. Officially, the Canadian arm of the organization shut down after being rightly labeled a terrorist group. The Proud Boys were established in 2016, spearheaded by Gavin McInnes, one of the co-founders of Vice.
All right, now that also shook me to my core because Vice's content is very interesting, y'all. And they do a lot of like pro wrestling stuff and a lot of like underground stuff and a lot of like and to be honest, I enjoy watching a lot of their content, and it just makes you wonder like what's really going on when you find out stuff like this. So yeah, it's these people are pretty scary.
Over the next few years, they went through a handful of leaders. The most recent being this guy, Enrique Tarrio, who in 2023 was sentenced to 22 years in prison for his role in the insurrection. Tarrio is a Miami Cuban, which tells you pretty much all you need to know as far as his politics goes. But it came out during his trial that he was also an informant for the feds, which led to a schism in the Proud Boys, who just couldn't believe that one of their own would work for the evil government. Gotta love how naive these people are. When the judge delivered the sentence, Tarrio begged the court, "Please show me mercy. I ask that you not take my 40s from me." That's how quickly the tough guy act crumbles. As of right now, the Proud Boys seem to be in disarray. They get kicked from every platform they try to organize on, a bunch of their members got locked up after January 6th, and they seem more than a little spooked that they got infiltrated by the feds. A handful of state branches have said they won't acknowledge any national leadership, and they're just kind of doing their own thing. So with any luck, the organization will die out. That doesn't mean their remaining members aren't dangerous, though, so keep that in mind. Besides the Proud Boys, we've got the Oath Keepers, the 3%ers, Patriot Front, and Patriot Prayer.
All right, now y'all should remember too, the Proud Boys were the group that during the presidential debate with Joe Biden, Donald Trump was asked to condemn, and he said to stand back and stand by. So no surprise, they turned that into merch and sort of took that as a presidential endorsement, and no surprise they were involved in January 6th. And so that's kind of where my familiarity with them comes from. Same thing with the Oath Keepers. The 3%ers are new to me. Patriot Front and Patriot Prayer are kind of new to me, but just hearing those names, I just have I have them all kind of in that same cloud of uh nebulous hate groups. To me, they are the new KKK, if that makes any sense. I mean, I know the original is still the original, and technically they're still around. Um, I think I think they've seemed to just have moved underground, and I don't know, or maybe just don't bother anymore. I don't know how being a fucking white supremacist works, y'all. you know, they don't recruit people like me. Um, so I don't know what they do, but that's how I think of these all now, and it seems to me again to think about the development of things. They seem to be even less feeling the need for discretion. Like they don't seem to need to hide who they are. They're free to bigot in the streets, so to say, and also be very active and voracious on social media. So it's just something to consider, right? When we want to do like a climate check, there's a lot of ways things are crazy, y'all. They're kind of tight right now. You know what I mean? Like I know we like to think things are better, and in many ways, I believe that they are, right. But there's other ways that are also really important, that things are just spiraling out of control, and it's insane to me that people can be um, openly affiliated with these organizations with no shame. Um, Yeah, and there's more, but we'll
The
get to it.
3%ers are the oldest group on the list. The organization was founded in 2008. If you live in Texas like I do, you've probably seen 3%er bumper
The
stickers. The
military,
name comes from the
yes.
assumption that 3% of a given country's population is enough to overthrow the government. The group was officially dissolved in 2021 after January 6th, and you'll start to notice a trend there. A bunch of its members were thrown in jail, and once again, Canada labeled them a terrorist group. Like the Proud Boys, local branches of the Three Percenters still remain active.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So both these are good points. Toto said the trouble is how much of it is in the military. Same, but also the interchange between our military and our police force means there's a lot of it there too, unfortunately. It'd be nice to look at the flag and feel even just a tinge of pride for the things we've accomplished. You know, just there's the reality is I'm an American, and it would be nice to live in a country that I felt proud of what it meant as a citizen of the world when you say you're an American. The truth is, I've literally just given up that hope. Like, it hit me when he said that, because I was just like, damn, like, it's a simple statement, but it actually really would be nice. And I'm realizing that that's like I've just totally given up. Totally. I've like completely like I'm literally in a state of dissociation. Like I'm going through a traumatic experience and I have to like externalize it. Like I don't like I don't even talk. It's hard, right? I can't even say American. Like I don't like saying that I'm an American. Like that's not a thing I appreciate. I just have to. It's like I live here. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like I don't identify as an American. I just live here. You know, primarily I feel stuck here. Um, would really appreciate an opportunity to be somewhere else. But yeah, I have no sense of like I'm ashamed of this country. I don't even like if I use like a patriot, I use a flag or something patriotic looking, like out of a sense of irony, you know. But to keep it a buck, like it would it, it would be better or great, I think, for us to not give up the game. Damn, I'm literally admitting in real time, like that there's literally merit to the people that argue to stay here and fight for it. Because I'm always like, come on, like I feel like it's an abusive relationship, to be honest with you, right? And why should you stay in an abusive relationship when the other party is not even trying to work it to make it better? It's one thing if you want to say we're trying to work it out, we're in therapy, we're seeking support, we're putting in this work to try to make this happen. But it feels like you're in an abusive relationship and you just getting clobbed upside the head every time you get home from a long day's work and you're having shit thrown at you and you're just like, fuck this, I'm out of here. And people are like, you should stay and make it better and fight because this is your home. And I'm like, why? Why should I sacrifice my life for a country that doesn't value that, doesn't value people like me? So why should people like me sacrifice for it? But that's just the one side, right? The flip side is, you know, this is our home too, right? And you know what I'm saying? We have every much of a right to be here and to secure our rights and our freedoms and to create the kind of world that we want to live in without being displaced. Right. And certainly there's the principal argument of not displacing yourself and sort of giving the enemy what they want in terms of marginalize you or just remove yourself from the picture, right? So there's definitely I know I'm putting a lot, but I want to tell you that I was really thinking about that comment. Yeah, that comment really kind of got me. So like, yeah, it would be nice, and maybe that's reason to stay and try to make it better here.
The Oath Keepers are the next oldest, founded just 1 year after the Three Percenters. This is another anti-government but pro-constitution group, and tellingly, its membership is 2/3 former military and police, and 10% active duty. Best guesses as to their numbers hover around 5,000 people, but the org itself claims to have a membership of 38,000. These thugs are known for showing up at protests, political rallies, and whatever events they determine to be woke, armed with guns and with their faces covered. Once again, a number of their higher-ups are serving over a decade in prison for seditious conspiracy, though this group seems to have been more resilient than their cowardly counterparts, choosing not to shutter their operation. In fact, according to a data breach, as of 2021, 48 state and local officials and 10 sitting state lawmakers were listed among the group's members. This would suggest a different approach from the other fascist cells, choosing to pursue electoral infiltration as opposed to strictly acts of terror. The final two organizations significant enough to mention are Patriot Front and Patriot Prayer. They all love this Patriot stuff, and we'll get to that in a bit.
Hey, Sumami.
Patriot Prayer was founded in 2016 in the suburbs of Washington State. Suburbs, that's another thing we'll talk about. Their whole shtick is to harass liberal and left-wing groups in the Pacific Northwest and get in street fights with anti-fascists, which have often been filmed and uploaded to inspire other budding fascists to get involved more physically. According to an informant, there are only about 15 of these guys. They've just been really good at making a name for themselves because typically fascists are cowards who will scatter when it looks like a fight is coming.
All right, now he's not going to talk about it, but we gotta talk about this cat right here.
According to an informant, there are only about 15 of these guys. They've just been.
All right, so oh man, why am I so bad at this? Got him. All right. So this cat over here is in a biker vest, right? And the patch says Lord's Army. Like that's the name of his biker club. And there's a weird like culture here where all those kind of elements in America come together, right? Like the military and former military, police, motorcycle culture. So even that name, like 3%er, to me, it to me deliberately reminiscent of like something like 1%er. And 1%er is the idea that you know, there was an official statement from, I don't know, some motorcycle organization back in the day that like, you know, 99% of motorcycle clubs are just, you know, regular law-abiding citizens, right? And so the criminal motorcycle clubs sort of with pride call themselves 1%ers, right? And you have a similar concept here, the 3%ers. Oh, it only takes 3% to overthrow the government or whatever. And so it's just a weird intersection. And then you get this guy here with his motorcycle vest, right? And their motorcycle club is actually called Lord's Army. And it's just like, first off, oh my God, it's just so fucking corny. Oh my God. Oh my goodness. Like what? Like what? Like just on some MC shit, just on some straight MC shit. That shit is fucking whack. Like you would be getting, yo, put that shit in the game, man. Put that put that shit, man. Do you know what people do to you? Do to you riding around with a patch on? It says Lord's Army. Oh my goodness. Oh, these goofballs. Oh, what a bunch of goofballs. And literally like, what's your partner supposed to put on it? What's your partner supposed to put on their vest? What they cut supposed to say? Property of Lord's Army. I can't. All right, let's just go. I just can't. But look, that's the scene, y'all. That's the motherfucking scene.
because
Oh.
typically fascists are cowards who will scatter when it looks like a fight is coming. Finally, the youngest org on the list, Patriot Front. This is another small organization, but I bet you've heard more about them than some of the others. Where the rest play coy and beat around the bush, these guys are explicit in their fascism. They've even got the fascies as part of their logo. If I had to guess which group would end up being the most influential in the fascist movement, it would be Patriot Front. For a bunch of reactionaries, they're pretty good at branding, combining traditional Americana with fascist symbolism. In every successful past fascist movement, that's been a key element. It takes on the flavor of whatever culture it boils up in.
Okay, now this is something so fundamentally interesting to me. I, I think there's always this idea that the other sides they're so good at branding, they're so good at marketing, they're so good at using social media or whatever. They're so good at rhetoric and community building and all this type of shit. Um, I think they have to be because they're full of shit, right? Like that gets overlooked in all this, but they're the bad guy. They're full of shit. Like they've got to make their shit look good and feel good and snappy and peppy and um. But at the same time, I think we need to be more honest about how impactful that stuff is. Um, just something as simple as like for me, like when like I think about like the channel, like it grows slowly through like community, and like just kind of being out here in our little corner of YouTube and letting it happen. Um, but a big part of that is, right, there's like a there's like a aesthetic in things, and that there's an algorithm, and like you gotta get with the algorithm. It doesn't it doesn't like certain things, and it does like other things. And then there's production value and thumbnails and editing, and that's why there's a reason for it, and you can't take it personal. You got to just understand, like, that's the nature of the beast, right? So that's what it really takes to build like a successful channel, in addition to obviously like the brilliant and talented like content creators. Um, and it's the same thing. Like I remember when Trump first started running, we had somebody come to Beacon where I was doing my graduate studies, and they were basically trying to give us a seminar basically about communication and how to tell better stories with our science, with our research, and how to communicate more effectively um, as researchers. Um, and they kinda started a whole thing because they were making the case really early about how Donald Trump was doing that much better than Hillary Clinton, and they predicted that was a big part of the reason that Donald Trump would win, which was still, like, laughable, right, to a room full of scientists at the time. Like, it was like, "Oh, this guy," it was like it was but he was onto something, and I think a lot of us know that now, right? So where am I going with this? We gotta walk and chew gum, y'all. We gotta do both, right? We gotta be like, yeah, we got the peer-reviewed research and the da 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 da, right? And his history and the awareness and all. We got a lot going for us when it comes to the meat and potatoes, the content, the shit that matters. But we gotta remember, like, attracting people to the cause, and we're in that attention economy, right? And we've got to do branding and all that shit better. That's why we need that on our side. We could break that off into a whole big discussion about like why we struggle on the left politically so much, right? I think this is part of it, is that like we haven't gotten our game together as much as the other side. So I think it's a matter of necessity for them. But that doesn't mean we don't need to do it too.
You've probably heard the quote, "When fascism comes to America, it'll be wrapped in the flag and carrying a cross." Case in point. Patriot Front is another group that punches above its weight in terms of membership. Best estimates put the number at just 200. But they accounted for 82% of all incidents in 2021 that involved the distribution of fascist, racist, or otherwise bigoted propaganda in the US. If you zoom out a bit, this is all kind of interesting. You've got your fraternity, your militias, your street thugs, and your propagandists. That's a pretty well-developed fascist undercurrent, even if, for now, they seem to be licking their wounds. What happens when they start organizing across the different groups? Speculation aside, the important thing to realize about American fascism is that it's not confined to this handful of explicitly fascist groups. It's become mainstream among the American right. Let me give you an example. Here's an ex-military business owner back during peak COVID.
But it's not going to be peaceful much longer.
Sumami said the other side is able to can their infight and support their candidate. That's the only thing I'm envious of. That's I think that's always been a strength of the right in terms of electoral politics. I'm with that. I mean, I definitely agree to that. But yeah, I do think they do. I don't know, like it's just weird. Like even like if you look at like I don't know, like they do their thing, like they do like if you look at CPAC, right? Like they turn shit into like a big show and a spectacle, like they're into it.
I just give it to them. I've never been a criminal. I'm telling you, good citizens are going to turn into real concerned and revolutionary citizens.
Next question. Soon. There you go.
And nobody else is going to say that. I'm probably the only person that has the balls to say what I'm saying right now. That we're building, we're organizing. And we'll work with law enforcement or without law enforcement. But you won't stop us when time comes because our families are starving. And if you don't hear the seriousness of my voice, I hope you open your ears. And you absolutely listen to what I'm saying. Because this is a warning for what's coming. It's not going to be peaceful much longer. It's not going to be rah-rah. It's not going to be speeches. It's not going to be gathered outside saying a Pledge of Allegiance. It's not going to be waving flags. It's going to be real. When you've seen the things that I've seen, I went to war for this country. I've seen the ugliest, dirtiest part of humanity. I've been in combat, and I never want to go back again. But I'm telling you what, I will to save this country. If it has to be against our own citizens, it will happen. And there's a million people like me, and you won't stop us.
Sounds pretty bad.
All right. Yeah, it sounds pretty bad. Also just totally interesting because it's just who's allowed to use rhetoric like that in public and who is not. All right. But I'm gonna just throw a total curveball at y'all real quick, but it's gonna come back to our same old shit. For a real minute, I felt the pain in the man's voice, like on some real shit. You know, like that's one of them speeches where, setting aside the chest beating and the bravado and the absolute threat of it all, I could just recognize a fellow hurting citizen. And it's one of those things that humanizes the other side to me. Like, yeah, they're really hurting. The problem to me is, again, what they think the cause of their pain is and what they think the solution is. Again, this is where we should be uniting. If we could unite the urban interest and the rural interest just on some working class solidarity shit, we would be good to go. But we can't. And it's funny because so much of this, again, is and they're going to get into it, is just appealing to like white people in circumstances like largely suburban and shit who don't necessarily even have immigrants or people of color like in their lives. They live in suburbs. They work around all white people. They go to all white schools or predominantly white schools. They have predominantly white workplaces, yet somehow they're convinced in their head that it's immigrants and people of color that are stopping them from getting the opportunities, not the corporate overlords. It's wild to me.
But this is exactly the type of person we saw at the Capitol riot. All the fascist groups were there. At least 700 members of their organizations got arrested. But they were a drop in the bucket compared to what most people would call average conservatives. Only around 13% of those charged in the Capitol riots were formal members of militant groups like the Proud Boys, the Three Percenters, and the Oath Keepers. The remaining 87% were a mix of garden variety Trump supporters and conservatives LARPing as revolutionaries. The overwhelming majority of people who stormed the Capitol were just average Republicans.
Cheers, yo.
And you can tell. They didn't look like the typical far-right extremists. They were typically older, with around 2/3 being over 35. They were much less likely to be unemployed. A full 14% of the attendees charged were business owners, and 30% were white-collar workers. These aren't normal far-right extremist demographics. These are just Republican constituency demographics. That's why fascists target the suburbs, as we mentioned earlier. The aggrieved white middle class is ripe for radicalization. The average American conservative wants to overthrow the government to establish some weird anti-woke theocracy based on a mythologized version of the past. And don't take my word for it, they're literally advocating for it in their magnum opus, Project 2025.
All right. Now, this is another thing I wanted to throw a bit of perspective on, because this is an awesome video, and just shout out to Second Thought, and also, like, man, just the work that goes into these videos. We got to think about these demographics, right? Because what's interesting to me is not so much thinking about the radical part of the far right movement as, you know, a very small portion of the overall national demographic. It's like a rather large part of people willing to do the sort of extremist niche or the extremist role in a much broader movement. In other words, in terms of, if you're going to create like a pyramid of in violence and destruction or whatever, that's a large group of people that are right up to the very tippity top in terms of how motivated they are and what they're willing to do. But then it's also the case that, of course, the huge concern is the base in central mass of the overall movement. And I hate to be preachy or churchy, but this is what it reminds me of. It's like the congregants. Like, most people who were at the Capitol on January 6th or whatever, they didn't need to, they weren't themselves seeing themselves as these extremists or radicals or whatever, but there was so many of them that were just there to be there and there to be part of the group and bought into the ideology, that there was plenty of cover for the more extreme ones, and then they were happy to go along with it. And so that's the real issue. And that's where there's the intersectionality of far right extremism, where yes, you have you sort of have this, you know, like literally like KKK type of like white supremacist extreme groups, and they're even different. They're even different, right? Because if you think about the KKK, like, the KKK was sort of known for its breadth and sort of diversity in of like within racist white people. In other words, like, it was a lot of working class people, white collar people, people in the government, regular folk, backwoods. Like, it was just like whoever. Whereas these groups, like, some of them are much more likely to be military or have some sort of, background, again, like we were talking about along those lines. So, um, there's perhaps even more for potential for sort of organized tactical violence and things like that. Um, but yeah, like I think what happens is there's a really important synergy where to a lot of the people there, they're just they're just aggrieved conservatives. They were just Trump people and they really believed in the Trumpist thing and MAGA and Trump told them to they came to just be a part of the Trump experience, right? Like if you look at like a Trump rally, a lot of those people, nothing's changing for them, right? They're not there to get anything crazy. They already know who they're going to support. They're going to vote, up and down the ticket red or whatever. Um, they're just there to like have an experience. Like it's an experience to like go to like it's like a conference or a fucking Grateful Dead concert or some shit, like a MAGA rally to them. It's like something, right? And even Trump very much plays to their sense of like their Christian aesthetic. Like you got to start with the music and then we're up, and then Trump comes and gives us some long ass the drony, boring speech, and that's the word, and we got to cheer and egg them on, and amen, pastor, and then we're gonna get the music playing at the end. But they're there the whole day before, like camping out, tailgating, listening to country songs together, drinking beer, having time off. Like it's a thing to be at. And I think for a lot of them, that's what going to January 6th was. There was a lot of them that were like super Christian, and their church got super involved in this shit, and so they literally like their church organized church buses to go to the Capitol, and so they ended up going to listen to Trump's speech and all this stuff like that. And so they just there's so many people that get suckered into this, and that's what we're up against. Sure, these like extremist groups, yeah, they're fucked up. They're definitely fascist, but there's a way in which, again, like the way that so many American Christians have bought into the idea that they can make this a Christian nation, which means making it under the rule of their particular version of Christianity, right? That's fascist as hell. And if you have enough of those people who will go along with fascism because it's in the name of God and are not even being educated as to what fascism is and how they are in fact contributing to it, like that's we're super fucked, right? And that's what I meant about we have to talk about this more, because we're not even talking about fascism really. Like this video is second thought is, and good on them for doing that. But if you think about even this is kind of what highlighted it for me, even in terms of like what's going on with these college campuses, right? You have students who are literally protesting their tuition dollars and their government supporting, funding, and arming a genocide. And by all means, they have every right to do so. And we literally have like militarized police forces being deployed on college campuses to arrest people by the hundreds and often escalate and have violent conflicts with undergrads. Literally violent suppression of opposition. And then you have people like the I don't know, asshole business guy from Shark Tank going on CNN, basically threatening all of them, talking about how, oh, well, if you're participating in this, then you're not going to be able to get a job 20 years from now. You're not going to be able to have a career. You're basically throwing away your life by participating in this protest, like literally threatening economic retribution against teenagers for protesting a genocide that's being funded with their money. And then think about the narrative that these people buy into. They're constantly buying into this narrative that higher education is this woke, DEI, leftist fucking ivory tower, thing they should hate. And the reality is the people who actually go there, that actually study there, that actually then understand the economic reality of the institution, where the institution's money comes from and where the institution's money goes, actually recognize that their universities are part of the fascist capitalist endeavor that is funding genocide. And I've been trying, y'all know me, I've been trying to say this since I've started speaking about what it's really like in an academic position. And I've been telling y'all, universities are not liberal institutions. They're just not. You should not, you instinctively, you already know this. You already know that power in America lies with what? Money. Money is disproportionately given to whom? White men in power and old money, which is traditionally what? Conservative as shit. I mean, it's just obvious. We know this. Like that's the problem. That's part of the problem. It's not like we have a problem where like all the billionaires are socialists, right? Like, I mean, like that's not, we wouldn't even be having this fucking conversation if that was the issue, right? If really the power was in the woke DEI fucking power structure, we would not be having this conversation. Instead, what's happening is like students have to have sit-ins so that the university doesn't get rid of the African Studies department. Yeah, that sounds like some racist, fascist shit. Like it's so, and that ties into this whole thing too, right? Because think back to the guy talking about how he's angry because his people are hurting and everybody's having hard times. Right. Well, that's part of why he's having hard times. Is because even just being a regular American, a regular white American who not supposed to really have, and they're supposed to be your country, like you said, and y'all have historical privilege and all this type of shit. They made you hate education. And therefore you hated school, didn't want to deal with school. Y'all have an antipathy towards higher education. You've allowed higher education to become ungodly expensive in the type of thing that creates generational debt rather than generational wealth. Because again, you just thought that was a problem for woke leftist. I don't know. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, they literally make these people hate the very means by which they could pick themselves up by the bootstraps. But instead of being mad at their corporate overlords, again, they're mad at they're mad at the immigrants and black people that they don't know, and the trans people that they don't know.
Which we made a video about a while back. Okay, why is this happening? Conservatives have always been reactionary, but what's changed in the last decade or so? Well, there are a few factors. We'll start with a culture war issue, the white genocide myth. The Great Replacement theory is a classic among fascists. It asserts that there is a plot, which really means they think it's a Jewish thing, that the white race and white culture, whatever that means, are disappearing because of immigration from majority non-white countries.
Yeah,
Fascists believe
that's a good point, Jester. They often assume that leftism is fascism. You see that even in the I'm pull it up real quick. Even in the Patriot thing, the patriotfront.us. Um, they said that where's this? Hang on, I think it was the Life one? No, second one. I'll find it.
this will cause some general persecution of white people, because of course they can't imagine the world being run without one race subjugating another.
Oh, hang on. Yeah. All right. They said no placement of the private interest above that of the common good will stand unopposed as the barriers impeding the nation's will are overcome. Like they literally like that part right there. Oh yeah, that sounds pretty good. That sounds like socialism. They that's what you're right though. They're just confused. They're literally confused. They don't get how this works.
This is the theory that motivated the Christchurch shooter Brenton Tarrant and the El Paso shooter Patrick Crusius, and it's both unfounded and blatantly fascist. You won't be surprised to learn that this theory has a historical trajectory that starts in World War II,
Katina.
runs through the European fascist movements, the American Nazi Party, and has now found a home among the majority of the Republican electorate.
Wait,
Here's a clip of Tucker Carlson endorsing.
Pause. We got to run that back. Because this has been critical to what I've been dealing with lately.
Shooter Brenton Tarrant and the El Paso shooter Patrick Crusius, and it's both unfounded and which really means they think it's a Jewish thing, that the white race and changed in the last decade or so. Well, there are a few factors. We'll start with a culture war issue, the white genocide myth. The Great Replacement theory is a classic among fascists. It asserts that there is a plot, which really means they think it's a Jewish thing, that the white race and white culture, whatever that means, are disappearing because of immigration from majority non-white countries. Fascists believe this will cause some general persecution of white people, because of course they can't imagine the world being run without one race subjugating another. This is the theory that motivated the Christchurch shooter Brenton Tarrant and the El Paso shooter Patrick Crusius, and it's both unfounded and blatantly fascist.
Okay. And the other thing is you have to remember that part of what these movements do is create alternate realities. And part of that is you've got to see what's going on and then create a different narrative. And so those of us that are interested in creating a more diverse, inclusive, pluralistic society have to recognize the extent to which we actually do want those things to happen, but that there is no conspiracy, that this is really what America is supposed to be. So yeah, I don't know. That's the part that gets us, right? Because that's why they demonize DEI. That's why they demonize, because they see all of that as evidence of the conspiracy, when actually it's not. It's evidence of the changing values of people to create the world that we want to live in. And they need to understand that they're out of sync with the meta, that they're not, that they're, yeah, y'all know what I'm trying to say.
You won't be surprised to learn that this theory has a historical trajectory that starts in World War II, runs through the European fascist movements, the American Nazi Party, and has now found a home among the majority of the Republican electorate. Here's a clip of...
And that's what I wanted y'all to hear right there, was that this sort of alt-right bullshit has all bled into this whole thing with the American Nazi Party, and the other types of like racist movements. And that's why people who we know out here to defend things like Christian nationalism or Christian populism or whatever they want to call it, we're gonna call them Nazis. Because again, they're playing the Nazi playbook. They're operating the Nazi way. They're doing Nazi things. They're goose stepping day and night.
Tucker Carlson endorsing the theory on Fox, calling it by name, and likening it to eugenics.
Joe Biden just said it. To
Hey,
change
Gabby.
the racial mix of the country. That's the reason, to reduce the political power of people whose ancestors lived here and dramatically increase the proportion of Americans newly arrived from the third world.
Ooh,
And then Biden-
Sumami. White people have been trying to replace brown people like for like all of history. The irony of white replacement theory. Absolutely. Abso-fucking-lutely. And again, why are they talking about those college kids protesting instead of what those kids are protesting about?
Went further. He said that non-white DNA is the, quote, source of our strength. Imagine saying that. This is the language of eugenics. It's horrifying. But there's a reason Biden said it. In political terms, this policy is called the Great Replacement, the replacement of legacy Americans with more obedient people from
Legacy
faraway countries.
Americans.
They brag about it all the time. But if you dare to say it's happening, they will scream at you with maximum hysteria. And here you have Joe Biden confirming his motive on tape with a smile on his face.
This type of racist xenophobia isn't new. Every fascist project in history has needed to create a chosen people and a barbaric enemy to justify their anti-human politics. Even a cursory glance at any history book will make it clear where this trend comes from. But why does it start in the first place? Human beings can be awful, distrustful people, but just randomly deciding to build an exterminatory worldview out of their bigotry doesn't make much sense. We need to dig a little deeper and look beyond the culture war rhetoric to really understand the appeal of fascism. Socialism and fascism are both on the rise, and it's pretty easy to see why. Beneath every movement is an economic catalyst. Fascism is seen as a solution to an economic problem, just as socialism is. But the difference is that fascism does not threaten the primacy of capital, or the comfortable position of the white liberal, a critical ally of fascist movements throughout history. Economic hardship creates conditions where bitterness, distrust, and desperation can thrive, making the masses an easy target for charismatic and bombastic fascists.
Yeah, Katina, that's a great point, and I was thinking about it, and I should have paused it to just to address that in particular. To call them legacy Americans instead of recognizing the First Nations and original peoples that were here that we displaced and continue to benefit from their displacement and genocide. And yeah, it's just again creating an alternate reality.
Think back to that town hall video. What did the guy say was the spark for their aggression? Not being able to feed their families. And you know what? That's a perfectly valid reason to be upset. The problem is the solution he and other fascists land on is to exterminate or deport anyone deemed to be detrimental to white people making money and keeping their privileged position. Or, in their eyes, prevent hardworking patriots from losing economic ground because their opportunities are being stolen by foreigners. The economic base of fascism has always been the petit bourgeois, or as I like to call them, the roofing class, small business owners, the guys who have a handful of contractors and pay $1,200 a month on an F-150 Raptor that's never been used for any kind of manual labor. But I digress. I really try my best to understand fascists because it's an interesting phenomenon. Socialism offers, in my opinion, a common-sense solution to the ills of capitalism. Economic democracy. The people who do the work have a say in how the work is done, and profits can't be siphoned off by unelected corporate tyrants. Fascism, on the other hand, has to create this elaborate fantasy to justify why one particular group of people is destined to inherit the earth. And conveniently, it's the people in your country and the group you happen to fall into.
And that's a problem too, because again, and listen, I'm really not super in I don't know. I know Christians probably feel picked on when they listen to me, but I didn't choose the doctrines. I didn't choose to be raised in that nonsense. I just was. And I can tell you that I was raised with a fascist worldview. I was raised to believe that me and people like me and people who believed like me were the chosen people, and that literally our God was going to come and by force of supernatural power, um, take over and establish his kingdom on earth before, doing whatever he was going to do with me eternally. And that idea that we were stewards of the earth, and that literally the chosen people, the those who were going to be saved, those who deserved eternal life while everybody else deserved torment. um I just don't think we can address the fascism that's taking hold of America and not be honest about the myths and narratives that Americans have brought into that are fascistic. We've got to own that, um, especially because those are the narratives now that are being used to do the heavy lifting. Again, people are participating in things like a far right attempt to overthrow the government or interfere with the certification of election. They're electing elected officials to take away other people's rights because they've been convinced that they're entitled for their divine right to rule over others according to their beliefs. And I don't know how you can tell people that it's okay to believe that and then expect them to resist fascism.
It's the same gripe I have with Calvinists. They believe that all humans are predestined to go to either heaven or hell, and nothing we do can influence that destiny. I've never met a Calvinist who believes they're going to hell. If I try really hard to check my basic human decency at the door, I can see why fascist mythology could be appealing. It lets you off the hook. It justifies the worst cruelties because you are defending what is good and righteous from human animals who want to tear down a beautiful civilization. The problem is, the civilization fascists claim to be defending has never existed. It's a myth. There is no single white race. Just ask the Irish, or the Italians, or the Russians, or the Ukrainians, or the Jews, who have all had their white card revoked or granted at some point. There is no period in American history where everything was great for the white working class.
Yeah, this was something interesting for me. So some of y'all know I grew up, I was the only white kid in all black schools. I don't know how many people that's new information for anymore. Um, Maybe somebody. But one of the things I thought was interesting was some of the schools had very different identities. So, for instance, the school that I went to for, um, let's say, fifth and sixth grade, so the end of elementary school, was very Italian, very Italian. just, just oh my goodness, the last names, the community, the style, oh my goodness. Um, and there was this sort of narrative, right? There's a way in which Italian Americans have an identity that to them is different than what it means to be white. It's weird. Like, I'm not saying they don't know they're white. They know they're white, but if you really talk to them, what it means to be Italian, right? That's not their skin color. That's like their cultures, their tradition, and their narrative of that is tied to, you know, wherever the immigration in their family was, whether that was their parents' generation or their grandparents' generation, or maybe even earlier than that, what traditions they brought with them, how they were seen as strange, how their ethnic features, right? They have different features, some different complexion, sometimes, right? Not and so they have stories of how those things were struggle points, and that's why they're points of pride. Like, one of the things that I've had to learn over my years is, because I always feel weird when people have cultural pride. It's always felt weird to me to have pride over things that you don't control, or you didn't choose, or didn't do anything to have, right? Um, but it's always made sense to me in terms of things that are that attached with some sort of overcoming, some sort of, I don't know, some struggle or whatever, right? Versus something that's considered like a majority identity, or whatever the baseline is, or I don't know. Um, and so, like, with Italian people, I've learned, like, oh, like, a lot of what their pride comes from is the ways that they were treated differently, and they were made to feel like they were not um like other white people, and a lot of that was differences of just their culture and their religion, and different things like that. So yeah, that's true. And then my high school was very, like, and again, there were mixes and other people there, but there's very much Irish community, and a lot of people were in, and you realize, that's a, like, they have their own history of struggle and being rejected, and not accepted as a proper white person or whatever. And of course that changes, and everybody's always treated black people differently, right? But yeah, like, that's definitely something I learned and gained an appreciation for, and that's sort of where sometimes the sense of community comes from. So, like, I could tell you, like, being the only black kid, like, there was a lot of fucked up, like, racist shit. There just was, right? But part of the response, part of the, like, support, part of the people who were cool, part of the people who, like, took care of me and they tried to protect me and look out for me, was people who understood, like, yo, people used to treat us like shit because we were Italian. So, like, don't be mean to the black kid. Like, people used to treat Irish people like shit. So don't be mean to the black kid. You know what I mean? Like, there's that too.
Every worker in this country has always been at the mercy of the elite, but not the elite fascists assume are pulling the strings. It's not a shadowy cabal of woke Jews. It's just the people who own the means of production.
Yeah, I don't
They're
know
not
what I
shy
said,
about it.
That's
People
what I
like
meant.
Warren Buffett routinely admit there's a class war being waged, and that the capitalists want to make sure that they win it. The glorious fascist revolution that these self-proclaimed patriots want, it's not revolutionary at all. It's just turning back the clock to a time where these class antagonisms were less apparent, where the capitalist class still had complete control over society, but maybe black people had fewer rights. If that's your vision of utopia, you're a moron. You are risking decades in prison because you want to make sure the boot stays on your neck because you like the lies the boot spouts while it's stepping on you. The Republicans love fascists because it's an ideology that maintains the economic status quo. They don't like it when their useful idiots try to lynch them, so people have to go to jail for that. But on the whole, there's a reason the ruling class tolerates fascism and not socialism. Socialism is genuinely revolutionary, whereas fascism is just a cancerous offshoot of capitalism that can, in their mind, be used as a tool when needed. And this isn't the first time the ruling class has taken advantage of economic precarity. Once upon a time, a group of super wealthy capitalists hatched a scheme to try to convince a group of vulnerable Americans to launch an insurrection and overthrow the government, at which point the group of oligarchs would establish what amounted to a fascist dictatorship in the service of capital. Sounds a bit like January 6th, doesn't it? This attempted coup was called the business plot, and it actually happened way back in 1933. The short version is that a retired general, one Smedley Butler, was approached by a would-be financier who offered him funding and 500,000 men to lead an insurrection to depose then-President FDR. Roosevelt's election and subsequent economic reforms had horrified conservative businessmen, who saw him as a socialist. So, naturally, when given the choice between socialism and fascism, they overwhelmingly sided with fascism, telling Butler that
I've heard him say this before, but it's an important refrain to highlight from second thought, that given the choice between socialism and fascism, they always choose fascism, and that is this thing that I've been thinking about a lot too. Um, I've been thinking about like how to work with people, how to talk to people, how to really be effective. I'm not saying that being effective is the most important thing or the only thing, but it is a thing, and I definitely think about it. And I've definitely wondered about, just being easier to digest, trying to have a presentation that um is easier for people to accept. And unfortunately, talking explicitly about things like fascism and socialism, um, and the whole host of other things I like to talk about, just aren't safe in that regard. And I feel like we just have to like deal with it. Hang on a second. Um, oh no, we're fine. Um, because we have to. We can't like, I'm wondering, like, we're literally a country, y'all, that I actually thinks that socialism is worse than fascism. And we've demonized socialism to the point that so many Americans think this is a Christian nation, and they also think socialism is satanic. So again, like, I just feel like we have to start to talk about them all the time. The way we think it's important to talk about racism, the way we think it's important to talk about other forms of bigotry, the way we think it's important to talk about class struggle, the way we think it's important to talk about um, th- combating the harmful influences of certain religious traditions. We've got to say in 2024, we have to talk about things like fascism and alternatives like socialism, because there's no way to make America a more socialist country if we can't even talk about it.
they hoped to install him as an all-powerful Secretary of General Affairs, while Roosevelt would assume a figurehead role. Unfortunately for the plotters, Butler ratted them out. In his later years, General Butler had come to support FDR and was a fairly outspoken critic of capitalism, referring to his past self as a high-class muscle man for Wall Street. The business plot failed, and it gives us a great example of how economic precarity can be weaponized to fascist ends. The capitalists understood that thousands of First World War veterans were disenchanted with the US, having not received their promised benefits, and they figured if they could just get a popular, willing leader to stoke the discontent into a fascist fervor, they'd have free reign of the country's economy, creating an unholy merger of capital and the state, a cornerstone of fascism. What we are seeing today has the same hallmarks of every other period where fascism has grown in popularity. Economic insecurity, the formation of fascist paramilitaries, and a series of charismatic figures trying to tap into the rising tide of far-right populism for personal gain. While it's important to have empathy for people who are struggling economically and looking for answers, once someone chooses to become a fascist, they are a threat. But it's also important to realize that these people are by and large losers and cowards. They talk a big game, but they run away when faced with anti-fascist resistance. Instead of getting up on a soapbox like their idols, they target children with hate speech and lurk online. They wear ridiculous outfits complete with cardboard shields. And if we're being honest, most of these people don't really match the Ubermensch archetype. At the end of the day, they're pathetic reactionaries who whine about wokeness and weaponize culture and religion to spread a hateful message with no basis in reality.
Okay, now this is sort of where the main point that I wanted to sort of add to this whole discussion comes in. You see, he mentioned that, you know, they're cowards and losers, and I'm not going to disagree with that. Um, and that rather than emerging as sort of these leadership emboldened leadership figures that they imagine themselves to be, they lurk online. And I think that that's where we come in, and I don't think what they do online should be overlooked, because I look at it as, again, a great synergy. And I think the online spaces are where a lot of their identity goes to be reinforced. Um, you know, walking around, in costume and doing this sort of things. There's always going to be those that do that, but that's a lot of social risk for most of them. That's why even online, so many of them hide behind avatars and all of this type of stuff. But it is important because it's where their identity gets reinforced. In other words, it's where their conservative politics and their Christian identity and their particularly pernicious bigotries get packaged together, right? It's where they flow from Joe Rogan content to apologist content to right-wing media content, right? And then into, let's say, like a debate space or some sort of live thing where they're going to now interact with others, right? And so we shouldn't overlook the importance of what goes on in these internet spaces, because this is the sort of public forum of our time, and it's where the seeds of so much of this stuff is planted. And what you see really on something like a January 6th, rather than it being the way it would have been in the early days of the internet, where what's going on in the world was reflected in sort of how people moved in the internet. You see sort of how people move in the internet spilling over into how they're motivated into acting in these spaces. So it's almost like the radicalization is seeded and sort of starts now on social media and the internet. Um, so I think we should not overlook our role in countering that in these spaces, even if we do so on a small scale. It's sort of like, offline politics. And my dad would always tell me all politics is local, right? And when you look at people who really care about changing their world and changing their communities, they get involved in stuff. But most people who are involved in stuff, they're involved at local levels. Like I know a lot of politicians in New Jersey. It's one of the, interesting things. And just the overwhelming scale, like most of them are between the state and the county and the ward and the city. There's way more people in those levels than, like a senator or somebody in the US House of Representatives. And I think the same thing is true online, that there's the locality of our community, and then how, your network and the sphere of influence that you have interacts with larger spaces or spaces on different levels. So, let's just not overlook our role in that. All right, here we go.
But that doesn't mean they're not dangerous. Never underestimate your enemy,
Bluegrass, there you go.
especially when they've convinced themselves that they are the chosen ones and everybody else is subhuman. So, is the US headed for fascism? Yes and no. The US is a settler colonial imperialist project. It's primed for fascism by default. Any nation dependent on the exploitation of others is one bad quarter away from going full Mussolini. That being said, the economic conditions that allow for the growth of fascism also result in the growth of class consciousness, which gives socialism a chance to fight back. Under every single fascist regime in history, the socialists were the first to be targeted, because fascists know that socialism is a threat to capital, and that any truly egalitarian system has to get rid of the exploitative system that is capitalism. Fascists don't want revolutionary change. They want violent maintenance of the status quo, and they want to turn the violence of the empire, usually reserved for foreigners, inward, suppressing whatever groups they don't like. So yes, fascism is on the rise. So is socialism. And it's our job to make sure this time, fascists don't get their way, and that instead, we forge a path towards a brighter, more humane future.
Yeah, love that. Love that. So I guess a little bonus closing thought for me is like, it's important to be honest about our history. And the same way the sort of white utopia that far right fascists think we can return to is a mythology, a sort of multicultural is a mythology, rather, that's a myth, right? That's a thing that never existed. The sort of pluralistic multicultural utopia that we want has never been a reality, at least in this country's history either. This is a country founded on land that was stolen from First Nations who were displaced, if not genocided. And we have an economic system based on slavery, right? Of people who were again displaced and forced to work as property. That our justice system has always enforced that women even did not have full citizenry and rights. So it's important to see that part of it too. Because that's where like the shit we're doing when we're trying to acknowledge and deal with systematic racism and systematic oppression and these things. That's why people are so anti that. That's why they're so anti woke and anti DEI, because they recognize that this is the knowledge, this is the education, this is the understanding that people need that will raise class consciousness, that will ultimately undermine capitalism. So that's why it's important that we know our history, that we keep track of our history, and that we're able to be honest with people about the fascist tendencies of our history. So that people understand that we need to change the institution, because the institution was never built to serve the type of pluralistic world that we want to create. So if we want to have a justice system that actually is based on justice and in egalitarianism and everybody is equal under the law, then we need to change the system, because the system we have wasn't built for that. We need to build a different system that's actually built for that, right? If we want to actually be a country that it's great to work in, and being an American worker, you feel the weight of the American government and America's economic power working on your behalf. You have to create a new economic system, because the economic system we have wasn't built to do what's best for the worker. It's always been based on exploiting, marginalizing workers, and creating a economy where workers could barely survive. And they only create economy where you can survive because they need you to keep being around so so your labor can continue to be exploited. And that's why Americans are hurting. So again, we have to say, I know this isn't a comfortable conversation for you to have, but like, I support socialism. Like, I've just telling people about it, just telling your friends or your family, just telling people like, yo, I don't fuck with capitalism like that. Oh, really? Yeah, I don't really think it's that good for us. What do you mean by that? Yeah, you ever think about how work sucks for most people, and like, the economy just favors the rich? Like, maybe it shouldn't be that way. Oh, okay. It's it's a little weird at first, but people are living this reality. They know things suck. They know things are struggle right now. They know about shrinkflation and surge pricing, and times are hard, and they understand that. So using that as the starting point for a conversation about, well, like, you know, the system isn't really working. I think people actually are more open to that than they think they are. Um, and given that there is some establishment of fascism as a boogeyman, there is some opportunity there to then raise awareness and more conscientious around it, so that it's sort of like, well, we agree it's not good to be fascist, right? Like, being a fascist is bad, right? And then sort of using that as a tool to maybe deconstruct what's going on with a lot of people's ideology and what they've signed up for in terms of their politics and the organizations they support. But look, y'all, this Friday night, I love y'all. I'm very, 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 very grateful that y'all have decided to take some of your Friday evening to come hang out. For those of you watching later, would love to know your thoughts about this. Are you willing to have conversations with others about fascism, about socialism, about these kind of topics? Do you think they're important? Um, do you have any insights or suggestions about these type of conversations, or concerns, or things you want other people in the community to sort of talk about? Let's keep the conversation going. As always, I'll be hanging out and gather. Appreciate y'all so much. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Thanks to the mods. Thanks to all the supporters. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Please hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And there are links in the description for Discord, for Gather, and also to support the channel and our mods and co-hosts. We'll see you on Sunday for Hot Program. I hope everybody has a good weekend. We'll see you